Welcome to our commercial real estate interview series titled Behind the Building, uncovering the strategy, the people, and decisions that shape commercial real estate. I love talking and connecting with people. I love commercial real estate, and I enjoy teaching. So by hosting these interviews, I hope to give the audience a behind-the-scenes look at different aspects of commercial real estate, featuring industry professionals and leaders who we work with every day to make it all happen. Here with me is fellow commercial broker Sledd Thomas of Sineath Real Estate Solutions. Welcome, Sledd.
Emilee, it's good to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. So Sledd is a fellow CCIM Institute member. So let's go ahead and start talking about CCIM Institute and kind of what it means. How long have you been a member, Sledd?
I started pursuing the designation in just around 2000, and then life got in the way and I kind of put it off. But the Institute changed curriculum. I got the hurry up call, unless you want to start over, you better get with it. So I have my designation now for 15 years. And it's been a good thing. It's been a wonderful thing. And I so appreciate what CCIM brings to the table in terms of who you have the opportunity to associate with.
Mm-hmm.
And your viewers may not know this, but I had the privilege as a board member of penning you, and that
That's
was
right.
a wonderful thing.
It was my honor to have you pin me. We'd done a couple transactions together and
Yes, we have.
work in the local market together, so it was wonderful to have your support, and that was in Chicago, and so it was great to have someone local like you that I respect do that for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you very kindly. And it's, having friends and is a great way to build networks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
And
like,
my CCIM journey, I started just when I had gotten into commercial real estate in 2020, and I did the hurry up method and did a lot of transactions, got my portfolio underway, and did the education. And so by 2022, I had it buttoned up, fortunately, but I am still learning every day from the CCIM Institute and what their continuing education offers. As far as being involved in the CCIM Institute itself, tell me about legislative committee, the legislative affairs that you've been involved in. I think you've been involved at the national, state, and local level. Is that right?
I was recently asked by OCHR to volunteer uh, on the Chatham Orange Legislative Affairs Committee too. So that's been a wonderful thing. They're very active. When you become a board member, you're asked to be a working member of the board, CCIM, North Carolina CCIM board. And so somehow I found legislative affairs and legislative affairs found me within that first year of being there. And Drew Shofady was there to help show me around, and so Pete Frandano, and so those great guys. I served on the Legislative Affairs Committee for North Carolina CCIM, and then also worked on it for the as a committee member for the national level, and eventually became vice chair and chair of the national committee for CCIM. What NAR and CCIM try to do is, expose you to what is going on legislatively on a state level and on a federal level to see, is the legislation that's getting passed, is that beneficial to the public and to us as practitioners? One of the things that turned me into a believer in the Realtors Political Action Committee and a donor to the Political Action Committee was actually going to DC and what's now called the Realtors Legislative Meetings. That's an annual meeting. They have something called the Day on the Hill, and they try and set it up so you can actually go face to face with senators and congressmen and women. And, to go in and sit down with a legislator, to have their ear, which is, that's an incredible thing to be able to have their ear. And to see that he didn't know anything about the 1031 tax deferred exchange and why it was so beneficial, the
Yeah.
importance of the 1031, that to see that light bulb go off is all of a sudden it's like, oh, this really does make a difference.
So it sounds like that pivotal moment where you had that light bulb go
Yeah,
off of, wow, this
yeah,
legislative committee that I'm a part of, I am really making a difference being face to face with these legislators and being able to
yeah,
make changes or sway their
That's right.
opinions and help educate them. Um,
Exactly. And, you know, so they're the experts on legislating, but we're the experts in commercial real estate.
mhm.
And they need informed associates and helpers to guide them.
Yeah, because it's not just about that we're the practitioners and we're benefiting from having these transactions, but with, for example, the 1031 exchange, we're able to help our clients build generational wealth through the 1031 exchange and help spur economic activity,
Yeah,
in the US. And so those 1031s are a very powerful tool to be able to do that and defer the taxes.
exactly. And if you don't know what it does, it's like the low-hanging fruit. Let's get rid of this and we'll save some money for the government. And um, actually, the 1031 makes probably three times what they would save, roughly speaking. And when you stop and think about, when somebody buys in 1031s into another property, they tend to do things that the current owner wasn't doing. They tend to upgrade the property, whether it's electrically or plumbing or HVAC. So they reduce the effective age. They're putting people to work, all the trades. So that's creating jobs. And they're reducing the effective age of the building. And so the tax benefit can go up in terms of what you pay the county and the city and the state on a tax level. So the ramifications of what it does is it trickles through the economy in ways that unless you really know what's going on, you would never know.
Hmm. Increasing the property taxes, like you were talking about. I mean, that's huge for a municipality, for a county to be able to derive more income from that property.
I don't know if it's the best thing we got going, but could you imagine what it would be like if it went away?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I know you've done 1031
Mhm.
exchanges, and it incentivized sellers to sell too.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly. So, what's one other piece of local or federal legislation that you think we as commercial real estate professionals and or the public who has commercial real estate, their investors, what should they have on their radar right now? What's going on?
it's interesting because when you have the opportunity to be on this committee, you start to realize that there really is a symbiotic relationship between the residential side of real estate and the commercial side of real estate. You know, you and I have had this experience, and just generically speaking, this is a great site for a target. Target says, well, we don't want to come because there's not enough rooftops.
Hmm.
And the other side of the scenario is there's plenty of rooftops, and the community says, well, we'd really like to have a Target here. And so they kind of one begets the other. So when you have an appropriate number of housing and that's growing for all the right reasons, retail tends to benefit. So that brings in the commercial real estate side. Um, so now what we're seeing is across the nation, call it 5 million, call it 6 million homes that in a normal scenario we would have within the building stock, but so there's this great big pressure to we got to build homes, we got to build homes, and it's complicated, but I think keeping that on the radar is interesting because there's this legislative effort to reduce things like building codes, zoning laws, environmental regulations to make things faster,
Hmm.
to create density where density wasn't, to do away with the not in my backyard type of thing. We want these to still be responsible so that in the case of like in Helene in Buncombe County, where they reduce the regulations on how you might hook up to the sewer or how you might build your home, that these homes aren't just cracker boxes that don't stand the test of time like other homes. Because you get people to move into them and then they start to fail. I think keeping that on your radar is important.
Some of the entitlement and code specific type of policies, trying to lessen those so they can just move forward with
Yeah,
getting
we
their homes built,
definitely need to streamline the process. No
streamline it.
question about that.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
just, in an effort to streamline the process, still want it to be safe. I think that's part of the thing you want to look out for. And you see that on the state level, and on the federal level too.
So related to commercial real estate, have you seen other examples besides the 1031 where the legislation um, involvement from CCIM Institute has made a difference? Some policies or some legislation that was being passed or not being passed as a result of the involvement?
Do you remember the broker lien law?
Yes.
Okay. That was done here in North Carolina. And for those that may not be familiar with it, it's basically somebody that tries to close a property, without paying a commission. So the broker has the right to put a lien on a property to make sure they get paid. That was legislative affairs in action. We all
Because
remember.
that's not unlike someone hammering nails or framing or clearing a site and having hours and hours and hours into the work, just like we as brokers have hours and hours and hours, sometimes blood, sweat, and tears, in a
Woo!
transaction, years into a transaction, because we know with commercial real estate, some of these transactions take, it's a long life
A
cycle.
long time.
So
Yeah.
yes, that it's not just we've worked on this thing for a couple of hours. There's a lot at stake
Yeah.
with the compensation that we're owed. So that's powerful. Did you have another example?
Yeah. We all remember COVID. Legislative Affairs was able to, brokers were considered essential people. So we didn't have to stay home in our house locked away. We were able to go out and conduct business. And I don't know, the lockdown was more than a year, I believe, and maybe longer. Stopping commerce would have been one of the worst things possible.
Right.
I mean, we help families, we help businesses, and that was a definite need, even though we were in the middle of COVID. Um, there was something recently, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission was looking at doing away with the North Carolina Real Estate limited non-residential commercial license. And that's a little bit arcane, but we were able to make them reconsider and keep some vestiges of that. And that's simply, if you're not from the state of North Carolina, you shouldn't be allowed to practice real estate in the state of North Carolina unless you have a license.
Mhm.
And if you don't have a license with the limited non-residential commercial license, someone could come in and pile up with you, have an arrangement with you, Emilee, and you kind of guide them through the process of doing business.
Mhm.
And we just think that's a whole lot safer for the state of North Carolina than having
Certainly.
somebody. I mean, we have to be licensed to practice here. Shouldn't
Mhm.
everybody else?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, the on the federal level, of course, there's the 1031, then there's the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, opportunity zones, which you're familiar with. For those that aren't, it just incentivizes developers to come into an area that might be a little distressed and start to bring economic life and jobs into that area.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have for brokers who say, I'm too busy for politics and following all of that? I just want to close deals. I just want to make my, get retirement, all those things. What do you say to those folks?
You know, gosh, where do I start, right? But there's two allegories. One of them is it's a little bit like tending your garden. Weeds need to be pulled. And then the other notion of, you know, open mouths, open mouths get fed, meaning if you don't sit down with the legislator face to face and help them with your expertise in terms of trying to design legislative statutes that, like the 1031 or various tax incentives or historic credit incentives, the notion of using an abandoned supermarket to turn into to get tax credits towards trying to turn it into a mixed use multifamily situation for more housing. If you don't take the time to get the ear of a legislator, it's like having a deaf ear. I mean, just imagine what it would be like if they didn't listen to us. It would be like having an uneducated person design legislation that is not beneficial to the community and some of the experts in it when it comes to whether it's residential real estate or commercial real estate. So if you're not having those conversations, if you aren't making an investment, if you are not inclining the ear of his legislator to, hey, here's some things that might be really beneficial for the community and the businesses within the community from a tax perspective or a building codes perspective, in my opinion, you're shooting your own self in the foot.
It's an investment of your time into your industry and
Yeah.
the livelihood of many, our economy. And so it's too important to not pay attention to and really be a part of.
And so one of the things that CCIM can help do is, like, I was a non-believer until that light bulb moment. And it's like, wow. So for the people that, think they're too busy or don't have the time, I would just encourage you to reconsider,
Mhm.
to open that door a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh,
And if legislative affairs isn't your thing, just to get involved with CCIM
well,
Institute, period. There's so
that's right.
many ways that you can get plugged in.
Yeah.
Just to say that out loud, they have other committees that are so helpful to our industry and, kind of education and all the different facets of what the CCIM Institute does. So, yeah.
No question. No question. I'm a little biased, but you're absolutely right, 100%.
Yeah.
Um,
So as a practitioner who was an appraiser for many years, real estate appraiser,
yeah.
now a commercial broker, what legacy do you hope to leave as someone who's had both the brokerage and this legislative involvement with the CCIM Institute? What do you want people to remember you for?
You know, I never thought I'd get old enough to have somebody ask me that, but thank you. Some of my experiences with CCIM and some of my experiences in legislative affairs are occasionally hard to understand, but I do appreciate having the opportunity to have those experiences. And I realize that, it has created a depth in certain ways, not every way, but in certain ways, a depth and a breadth of knowledge that that I failed to have before, that I wouldn't have had. And I've met people that are, you're in the trenches, and there's a fellow, whether they're a CCIM or whether they're just a great commercial real estate broker, that you have a chance to meet. It's a big coat and bigger shoes to fit into, but I guess I would say, if you are curious, if you're a curious person and you're curious about how the legislative process works, how changes can be made, how working with a group on a mission can be rewarding, and by seeing how opinions can be swayed,
Mhm.
just by taking the time to plant the seed, to get in the ear, make that investment to get in the ear, to hope,
Educated.
yes, sometimes the door closes, but a window opens. So I would just encourage you to do that. You can do that in simple ways, becoming friends with the government affairs director or GADs, they can kind of clue you in. Becoming involved with issues around the commercial real estate can make your journey as a broker, as a competent broker, fuller. So I would, whether you're on this committee or that committee, I like legislative affairs.
So, as we wrap up, I wanted to thank you again, Sled Thomas, for sharing your insight and about our commercial real estate industry and our awesome trade association, the CCIM Institute, and how it's so important to be involved to understand how the legislative process works. All these things affect our industry and economy. So if you in the audience have questions about policies and legislation that affect your real estate holdings, reach out to me, as I want to be your resource for all things commercial real estate. Thank you again, Sled.
Emilee, appreciate what you're doing. I think it's a wonderful thing, and thank you for having me. And thank you for being a friend.
And you too.